Picture this for a second. You've got a massive, elegant, organic molecule. Maybe it's a completely new, groundbreaking pharmaceutical, and it's just rotating beautifully in three-dimensional space. To understand exactly how it works, we have to know precisely how its atoms are connected. But here's the catch. When we run a complex molecule like that through conventional one-dimensional NMR spectroscopy, that beautiful structure just turns into a chaotic, crowded traffic jam of overlapping signals on a graph. It's completely unreadable. Well, in this explainer, we're going to fix that. We're moving out of the limited world of 1D spectra and stepping into the incredibly powerful map-like clarity of two-dimensional nuclear magnetic resonance, or 2D NMR spectroscopy. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the limits of 1D NMR, then enter the second dimension, break down the anatomy of a 2D experiment, learn how to read the 2D map, and finally dive into COSY and TOCSY.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the limits of 1D NMR, and what happens when simple spectra get crowded.
So traditional 1D Fourier transform NMR, it's absolutely fantastic for small molecules. It gives you these perfectly distinct peaks for your functional groups. But there's a hard limit to how useful it is. When you start analyzing larger, much more complex molecules, we're talking big proteins, nucleic acids, complex polymers, you're naturally adding a lot more atoms. And more atoms mean more signals. In a single dimension, those signals just pile up right on top of one another. You get these overlapping resonances that make the whole spectrum virtually impossible to decipher. The data's all there, but it's completely hidden in the clutter. To solve this massive traffic jam, we need to look at where the structural chemistry actually happens. Inside a towering, state-of-the-art piece of hardware like the Bruker 500 UltraShield spectrometer, we use insanely powerful superconducting magnets to manipulate the nuclear spins of our sample. And it allows us to manipulate those spins in ways that completely bypass the limitations of a standard 1D readout. Which perfectly sets up Section 2, enter the second dimension by adding a frequency access. Okay, back in 1971, a scientist named Gene Jenner had this absolute light bulb moment, which was later developed further by Richard Ernst. He basically asked, instead of trying to cram all our data onto a single frequency axis, where peaks are definitely going to overlap, what if we just added another axis? By distributing the signals across two frequency axes, 2D NMR spreads all that cluttered data out. It forms this incredible three-dimensional contour map. It gives us the exact resolution and separation we need to see exactly how individual atoms within a molecule are interacting with one another. It's a real game changer. Now, how exactly does the spectrometer pull this off? Let's get into the physical chemistry in Section 3, Anatomy of a 2D Experiment, focusing on the pulse sequence. Every single 2D NMR experiment follows a very specific four-stage chronology. First up is preparation, where the sample gets hit with a radiofrequency pulse just to excite the nuclear spins. Second is evolution, or T1. This is where the spins are allowed to process freely, and the magnetization is labeled with the chemical shift of the first nucleus. Third is the mixing time. This is the magic window where magnetization is actually transferred from that first nucleus to a second one. And finally, we have detection, or T2, where we continuously record the resulting signal. That timeline maps perfectly onto the actual spectrometer operations. After that initial 90-degree pulse, during the T1 evolution time, we're capturing the indirect interactions. But the really critical data exchange, that happens during the mixing time between the pulses. Information gets transferred between interacting nuclei in one of two ways, either via scalar J coupling, which acts right through the chemical bonds, or through dipolar interaction, which you might know as the nuclear Overhauser effect, acting directly through physical space. By running this whole sequence over and over, and just incrementally changing that T1 duration, we gather the massive matrix of data we need to build our 2D map.
So we've got our data. Let's move to Section 4, reading the 2D map, specifically looking at diagonals and intersections.
When you're staring at a homonuclear 2D spectrum, you're always going to see a main diagonal line running straight through the center of the map, right where the frequencies of the X and Y axis are identical. Honestly, those just correspond to your standard 1D chemical shifts. The really interesting stuff, the absolute gold mine for us, is found in the off-diagonal signals. We call these cross peaks. And here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. A cross peak is physical proof that two nuclei are coupled and interacting. The best part is we can actually physically trace these interactions. Because crosspeaks always appear symmetrically above and below that main diagonal line, we can just connect the dots. If you isolate two distinct peaks on the main diagonal, you'll find crosspeaks located directly at their intersection. By literally drawing a line from a crosspeak straight back to the diagonal vertically and then another line straight back horizontally, you can identify exactly which two atomic neighbors are coupled together. It's literally like reading a grid. Now, when you view a real, complex 2D contour map, I'll admit, at first glance, it kind of looks like an abstract painting. But look closely at the grid lines tracing from that central diagonal highway out into the scattered peaks. Every single one of those symmetrical dots off the diagonal is a confirmed interaction between atoms. They form this beautiful, intricate, and totally reliable web of molecular data, and it entirely bypasses that nightmare overlap of a 1D scan. Now that we know how to read the map, let's explore Section 5, COSY, Finding Neighboring Protons Through Correlation Spectroscopy. COSY is probably the most commonly used 2D technique, and it comes with some incredibly strict but useful rules. It operates via scalar J-coupling, which means it is strictly looking at interactions transmitted through actual chemical bonds. But, and this is key, it only works over really short distances. Specifically, it highlights protons that are exactly 2 to 3 bonds apart, like vicinal protons. You can think of COSY as a superpowered magnifying glass that only reveals a proton's most intimate, immediate neighbors. In an active CSESS spectrum, those cross signals forming distinct boxes off the diagonal perfectly represent those 3-bond correlations. By methodically stepping from one crosspeak to the next, chemists can physically map out the immediate atomic connectivity. Finding these specific cross signals allows researchers to derive phi torsion angles and meticulously trace the entire backbone of a complex protein. But, when you're dealing with a massive molecule with dozens of unassigned protons, interpretation can get pretty tricky. A highly effective pro tip for your strategy is to build a correlation table. You literally just list out how many crosspeaks each proton has. Like, if you find a specific signal that correlates to 3 other completely different protons by COSY, well, you can instantly pinpoint highly connected junctions in your molecule, like a branching proton 9, for example. Actually, scratch that. It doesn't just pinpoint it, it turns a daunting, terrifying chemical puzzle into a really satisfying process of elimination. But what if you need the bigger picture? That brings us to our final section, TOES-PCSY, the complete spin system via total correlation spectroscopy. If COSY is our magnifying glass for direct neighbors, then TOCS is the wide-angle lens for the entire neighborhood. While COSY relies on direct J-coupling over just 2 to 3 bonds, TOCS disperses magnetization through successive J-coupling. It acts exactly like a domino effect. It transfers the signal down the line, bond by bond, to correlate the entire unbroken spin system of a molecule, like an entire amino acid, all at once. In a typical TOC experiment, you are absolutely still going to see short-range signals, the ones you'd normally find in COSY. But the real magic of TOCY lies in the additional long-range signals. These are protons that are definitely not directly connected via 3 bonds, but they are still part of the exact same unbroken spin system. This incredibly expansive view gives us a highly distinct fingerprint. It lets a chemist instantly identify if they're looking at a specific spin system, like aspartic acid versus glutamic acid, just at a glance. Which leaves us with a final question to ponder. We've seen exactly how adding a second frequency axis completely clears up the chaotic overlap of 1D spectra. We've traced intimate neighboring bonds using COSY, and we've illuminated entire structural networks using TOCY. So if you were handed a completely unknown, highly complex natural product tomorrow in the lab, how would you use these techniques sequentially? By using COSY to find the immediate links and then TOCY to confirm the larger chemical chunks, you possess the analytical power to literally map the architecture of the invisible world. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.